All right, let's dive into the digital economy. It's something that's quietly transforming the world around us. We're looking at the digital economy, opportunities and challenges from margin world, and this deep dive I think is going to be really eye-opening.
Yeah, it's interesting because we often think about the digital economy as just online shopping or social media, but it's so much more than that. We're really talking about a fundamental shift in how we work and how we learn and even how we manage our money.
Yeah, the source really highlights how this shift is playing out, showing both this incredible potential and then some very real concerns that come with it. It's kind of like we're stepping into a world where the rules are constantly changing.
And that's a really good analogy because one of the most striking things about the digital economy is how quickly it's evolving. Something that was cutting edge yesterday might be completely outdated by tomorrow.
Exactly, yeah. So let's start by unpacking some of the opportunities that come with this shift. The source dives right into this idea of market democratization. So basically what that means is that anyone can become a global entrepreneur now.
Yeah, think about it. In the past, you would have needed a physical storefront and a lot of capital to reach a large audience. But now, with platforms like Shopify and Etsy, someone making, I don't know, handmade jewelry in their basement can sell to customers literally on the other side of the world.
It's amazing to think about how technology is breaking down those traditional barriers to entry. And it's not just about selling goods either. The digital economy is also transforming the way we work. A prime example of this is the rise of remote work.
Oh, absolutely. The source highlights how digital nomads are using tools like Zoom and Slack and Asana to work for companies that are located anywhere in the world. It offers a ton of flexibility and work-life balance, allowing people to travel or stay close to their families or really just design a work schedule that fits their own lifestyle.
Yeah, I can definitely see the appeal in that.
Yeah.
Having the freedom to choose where you work and how you work. That's a pretty radical shift from that, traditional 9 to 5 office job. And speaking of paradigm shifts, the source also talks about how the digital economy is impacting education.
Hmm.
And I have to say, this is one of the areas that I'm really excited about.
It's totally transformative. Online learning platforms like Coursera and Khan Academy and Udemy, these have made knowledge accessible in a way that we've never seen before. You can have, a farmer in India learning how to code online or a teenager in Brazil studying data science. It's really incredible.
Yeah, it really highlights how the digital economy is leveling the playing field. It's making education accessible to anyone with an internet connection and a desire to learn. It's no longer limited by where you live or how much money you have, and that's incredibly powerful.
And this accessibility extends to finance as well. The source talks about financial inclusion and explains how digital payment systems, things like PayPal, Venmo, even cryptocurrency, are opening up financial access for millions of people who couldn't access traditional banking systems before.
I found that section to be especially fascinating. The source gives a powerful example, this example of a farmer in sub-Saharan Africa who's now able to sell their produce online and get paid immediately without needing a traditional bank account. It's really a game changer for people in underserved communities.
Yeah, it really shows the potential of the digital economy to empower people and drive economic growth, especially in those developing countries where access to financial services has historically been really limited.
Okay, so we've painted a pretty optimistic picture so far, but the source also acknowledges that there are challenges that come with this digital revolution, and some of them are, honestly, pretty serious.
You're right. While the digital economy holds a lot of promise, it also presents a set of really complex challenges that we can't ignore. And one of the most pressing issues is the digital divide.
This is something that often gets lost in all the excitement around new technologies.
Mm.
The source reminds us that while some people enjoy this seamless access to the internet, there are many who are being left behind, especially in rural areas in developing countries.
And it's not just about missing out on social media. This is about access to things like education and job opportunities and even healthcare.
Yeah.
These are really essential parts of modern life that are increasingly reliant on the internet. You think about students in those remote areas trying to participate in online classes or people in underserved communities who can't access telemedicine.
Yeah, it really shows how the digital divide can actually make existing inequalities even worse. It's almost like creating a two-tiered society where those without access to technology are at a significant disadvantage.
Exactly. And to bridge this divide, it's going to take more than just providing internet access. We also need to make sure that people have the devices and the skills and the support they need to actually use technology effectively and participate in the digital economy.
And even for those who do have access, the digital economy has another big challenge: job displacement. The source talks about how automation and AI are fundamentally changing how we work. Some jobs are becoming obsolete as technology advances.
And we're already seeing this happening in all sorts of industries. Think about self-checkout machines at the grocery store or automated manufacturing lines. These technologies do increase efficiency, but they also displace the workers who were previously doing those jobs.
Yeah, and the source uses this example of truck drivers. It's a profession that could see a lot of job losses as autonomous vehicles become more common. It's a real reminder that while the digital economy does create new opportunities, it can also lead to job insecurity in certain sectors.
And this brings us to the very real need for retraining and upskilling. The skills you need to succeed in the digital economy are always changing, and individuals need to adapt to this changing landscape. We need to acquire the skills that are going to be in demand in the future job market.
It's almost like we're being called to embrace lifelong learning,
Mm.
to be proactive in developing new skills. That could be through online courses, vocational training, even just staying curious and trying out new technologies.
Absolutely. And another aspect of the digital economy that's both promising and challenging is the gig economy. Platforms like Uber and DoorDash and TaskRabbit offer a lot of flexibility and independence, allowing people to kind of be their own boss and set their own hours.
That sounds really appealing, but the source also points out some of the downsides. There's often a lack of benefits and job security, and workers in the gig economy might struggle to actually earn a living wage, especially when you consider the cost of things like fuel and vehicle maintenance or platform fees.
The source talks about this ride-sharing driver who might work really long hours but still struggles to cover their expenses and actually make ends meet. And it highlights the need to address these really important issues like workers' rights and fair compensation and access to benefits within the gig economy.
It's a complicated issue with positives and negatives. It raises some important questions about how we can ensure fairness and sustainability in this new way of working.
And speaking of issues that we really need to think carefully about, the source raises another concern that's becoming super relevant in this digital age, and that's privacy.
Right, it's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
We love the convenience and the personalized experiences that come with the digital economy, but it often comes at the cost of our data being collected and analyzed.
The source gives the example of how our browsing history can actually influence the prices that we see online or the recommendations that we get. It's subtle, but it's a very powerful way that our data is being used. And it makes you wonder, who actually owns our data and how should it be used?
It's a debate that's only going to get more intense as the digital economy grows and evolves. Do we prioritize convenience over our privacy, or do we find a way to balance those two? These are questions we really need to think about as individuals and as a society.
Absolutely. And it's not just about individual privacy either. It's about how data can be used in ways that are discriminatory or harmful. We need to make sure that data is used ethically and responsibly and that people have control over their own information.
And on that note, about power dynamics, the source also looks into the trend of monopolies within the digital economy. We see this happening with those big tech companies like Amazon and Google. They've accumulated a huge amount of power and influence. It raises some concerns about fair competition.
That's a really good point. The source talks specifically about Amazon's impact on small businesses and Google's control over search and advertising. They're prime examples of how just a few dominant players can actually shape the entire digital landscape.
It's a conversation that we need to be having. How do we encourage innovation while also preventing these monopolies from crushing competition and limiting the choices that consumers have? It's about finding the right balance.
Absolutely. We need to think critically about what could happen if we allow just a handful of companies to control vast points of the digital economy. We need to make sure that the digital marketplace is a level playing field where smaller businesses and startups have a chance to succeed.
And of course, we can't talk about the digital economy without addressing cybersecurity, right? It's that elephant in the room. As our lives become more and more connected to the online world, the risks of things like cyber attacks and data breaches and identity theft, they all just keep growing.
Absolutely. The source highlights this really alarming increase in cyber attacks in recent years. They're affecting hospitals and government agencies and businesses and individuals alike. It's a wake-up call that none of us are really immune in this digital age.
And what's especially concerning is that small businesses are often hit the hardest. They might not have the money to invest in strong cybersecurity, which makes them easy targets for hackers.
That's why it's so important to raise awareness and educate people. Individuals and businesses need to understand the risks and be proactive about protecting themselves. Even simple things like strong passwords and two-factor authentication and being aware of phishing scams, those can make a big difference in preventing cyber attacks.
It's about creating a culture of cybersecurity where everyone understands that they have a role to play in protecting data and systems. It's not just the responsibility of tech experts, it's something that we all need to be thinking about in our daily digital lives.
Well said. And that brings us to a really crucial point. The digital economy isn't this unstoppable force that's just happening to us, you know? We are creating it. We have the power to shape it through the choices that we make, the actions we take, and the policies that we support.
That's such an important reminder. It's not about resisting change, it's about steering it in a direction that actually benefits everyone.
So, as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, I want to turn it over to you, the listener. What aspects of the digital economy are you most excited about or maybe concerned about? Take a moment to reflect on your own experiences and how this digital world is shaping your life.
We'll be back in just a minute to continue exploring these ideas, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the digital economy. Before the break, we were talking about some of the major challenges that come with this shift to a digital world. But our source doesn't just leave us with a list of problems, you know. It
Mhm.
actually offers some really interesting ideas about how we can navigate this complex landscape and actually shape the digital economy into something that's a force for good.
That's a great point because it's easy to get overwhelmed by the potential downsides, right?
Yeah.
But the source reminds us that we actually have a role to play in this whole process. It's not about just accepting these changes. It's about actively participating in building a digital future that works for everyone.
Exactly. And one of the first things that the source emphasizes is the importance of continuous learning, especially for individuals. The skills that you need to thrive in the digital economy are constantly changing, so being able to adapt is really key. It's not enough to learn a skill and just say, okay, I'm done, I've got it. You need to keep learning and adapting to stay relevant.
It's almost like, thinking about how fast technology changes. It's kind of like what the source says about the half-life of skills getting shorter and shorter. You know what I mean? What we know today might be completely obsolete in just a few years, which is a little bit scary, but also kind of exciting.
It is. It's like a call to action to embrace lifelong learning, whether that's taking online courses, attending webinars, even just being curious and reading about new things. We need to be proactive and develop new skills and knowledge. We can't just rely on what we know now to carry us through our entire careers.
And the source specifically mentions skills like, coding and digital marketing and e-commerce as being really valuable for the future. But it's not just about those technical skills, is it?
Right. It's also about those, what some people call soft skills, things like critical thinking and problem solving and communication. Those are skills that are becoming increasingly in demand in all sorts of industries, regardless of how technology might be changing specific jobs.
So it's about staying ahead of the curve and preparing for a future where being adaptable is really our biggest asset.
Mhm.
But the source doesn't just focus on individuals, it also looks at the role that businesses have to play in shaping the digital economy. What are some of the key takeaways there?
Well, the source argues that businesses need to focus on both innovation and inclusivity. It's not just about maximizing profits, it's about considering the impact that their actions have on their employees and their customers and society as a whole.
It's like acknowledging that they have a responsibility to be good corporate citizens in this new digital age. They really have the power to help shape the direction of how all of this evolves.
Exactly. And the source gives some encouraging examples of companies that are taking steps in the right direction. Some companies are investing in upskilling their workforce, offering training programs to help their employees move into new roles as automation starts to change those traditional jobs.
That's a great example of how businesses can actually do something to address that challenge of job displacement that we were talking about before.
Mm.
It's about giving their employees the tools to adapt and thrive in a changing work environment instead of just leaving them behind.
Yeah, and other companies are tackling the digital divide head on. They're donating technology or offering affordable internet access in those communities that don't have it. They're acknowledging that everyone deserves a fair chance to be a part of the digital economy.
It's really inspiring to see companies step up and realize that they have a role to play in creating a more equitable digital world.
Mm.
But what about governments? What can they do to address all of these challenges we've been talking about?
Well, The source emphasizes that we need policies that can find that balance between promoting innovation and having some regulation. It's about creating a space where technology can thrive, but at the same time protect the rights and the well-being of citizens.
So it's about finding that sweet spot,
Right.
right? Where regulation encourages responsible innovation, but it doesn't stifle creativity or progress. It's a delicate balance for sure.
It is. The source mentions data privacy laws like the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, as an example of how regulation can actually protect people's rights in the digital age. It sets some clear standards for how companies can collect and use personal data, and it gives individuals more control over their online privacy.
It's about making sure that those fundamental rights that we have are also protected online, which is so important now that so much of our lives are connected to technology.
And what about those monopolistic tendencies in the digital economy? What can governments do about that? The source suggests that we need antitrust actions against those really dominant tech companies. It's a way to try to foster a more competitive landscape to prevent just a few powerful companies from controlling entire markets and basically squashing innovation.
Yeah, it's about making sure that smaller businesses and startups have a fair shot at competing and contributing to the digital economy. And of course, there's that looming threat of cybersecurity, which just seems to be getting more and more serious. What does the source recommend the governments do about that?
Well, it stresses that governments need to invest in cybersecurity infrastructure and research. We need to be developing stronger defenses against cyber attacks and doing more to raise awareness among citizens and businesses.
It's about recognizing that cybersecurity is a national security issue now in this digital world. We need to be prepared to protect ourselves, not just from hackers, but from hostile nations as well.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to the core idea of the source material. The digital economy isn't some kind of predetermined fate. It's something that we are creating right now through the choices we make and the actions that we take.
It's a really powerful reminder that we have the ability to shape the digital future. It's not about passively accepting whatever happens. It's about actively working to build the kind of digital world that we want to live in.
So, as we move into the final part of our conversation, I want to challenge you, the listener, to think about the role that you play in shaping this future. What can you do as an individual to contribute to a digital economy that's more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable?
What are the values that you want to see reflected in the digital world? And how can you use your voice and your actions to help promote those values?
We'll be exploring these questions and more in just a few minutes, so don't go anywhere.
We're back for the final part of our deep dive into the digital economy. It's been quite a journey so far, right? We've explored everything from the amazing opportunities to the complex challenges, and we've talked about how we're not just along for the ride with this whole digital transformation thing.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting conversation, and I think the most important takeaway is that the digital economy isn't some fixed, predetermined thing.
Yeah.
It's constantly changing, and we all have a role to play in shaping what it looks like in the future.
And our source, the digital economy, opportunities and challenges from Margin World, really emphasizes that point. It's not just a neutral analysis, it's like a call to action.
Right. It challenges us to really think about how we want to use technology. It's such a powerful tool. Are we going to let it make existing inequalities worse, or are we going to use it to create a world that's more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable?
That's such a big question. And the source doesn't just leave us with these abstract ideas either. It actually gives some concrete examples of what a more positive digital future could look like. One that I thought was really interesting was the idea of using e-commerce to help revitalize rural communities.
Yeah, that's a great example. Imagine a farmer, maybe in a small village somewhere, who can now, because of these online platforms, sell their, I don't know, organic produce directly to consumers in cities, maybe even in other countries. It's creating economic opportunities where there weren't any before.
It's not just about making more money, though. It's about breathing new life into those rural areas. Preserving traditional ways of life, promoting sustainable practices. These are things that might not survive in a globalized world without something like this.
It goes beyond just the economics, too. Think about the potential to connect people across geographical boundaries. It could help people understand and appreciate different cultures, different ways of life. The digital economy can help bridge those divides in ways that we couldn't have even imagined just a few decades ago.
Another really fascinating concept that the source brought up was this idea of humans and robots working together,
Yeah.
you know, not as replacements for each other, but as collaborators. It's about changing the way we think about this. Instead of fearing job displacement, we could see it as a partnership where we're enhancing each other's capabilities.
You're right, because we always hear about robots taking our jobs, and that's scary, of course. But the source paints a different picture. A future where robots handle those repetitive, dangerous tasks, and humans can focus on things that require more creativity and problem solving.
I'm picturing a factory, right? Where the robots are doing all the heavy lifting and the super precise work, and the human workers are overseeing the process. They're troubleshooting problems. They're making those higher level decisions that require human intuition and ingenuity.
Yeah, that's a great way to visualize it. And think about the potential benefits. We could have increased efficiency, it would be safer for the human workers, and it would give those workers opportunities to learn new skills and take on roles that are more fulfilling,
Yeah.
mentally stimulating.
It's about using technology to make us better, to augment what we can do, not to replace us altogether. And of course, we can't forget about data privacy. It feels like one of the biggest challenges of this digital age. But the source does offer a little bit of hope.
It does. It imagines a future where privacy isn't just something we think about later, it's built into the design of digital systems from the very beginning. A world where we can have personalized experiences without sacrificing our privacy, where data is used to improve things like healthcare and education, but within ethical boundaries.
It sounds almost like a utopia. But is it really that impossible? I mean, we're already seeing more awareness about this issue. People are demanding more control over their data, and governments are starting to enact stricter privacy regulations.
And businesses are realizing that respecting people's privacy isn't just about following the rules, it's about building trust with their customers and creating a more ethical and sustainable digital ecosystem.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive here, I want to leave you with this final thought. The digital economy isn't some external force that's dictating our lives. It's a reflection of us, of what we believe in, and the choices that we make.
The decisions we make today, both individually and collectively, are going to determine what kind of digital world we end up with, for ourselves and for future generations. It's up to each of us to be thoughtful and intentional and to really engage in shaping this digital future.
It's been great exploring all of this with you, and I hope this conversation has made you curious, maybe even inspired you to take a more active role in building a digital world that benefits everyone. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.